Bam. All right, we're officially recording. Thank you, everybody who has joined us. Feel free to write into the little comment box here that we have going into the chat box where you are in the world right now. I love kind of knowing that we have a global audience for the knowledge drop, because we got people obviously hanging out in different remote year cities, but then also some citizens maybe back in their home cities catching up with the knowledge drop tonight. What do we got? Selena Workspace, Medellin, Mexico City, Bogota. A lot of people over in LATAM. I'll be over in LATAM pretty soon. Anyway, that's besides the point. Thank you for joining us for the knowledge.
Masi.
Yeah, Masi's here. Beautiful. But yeah, also some people in Asia, Kuala Lumpur and whatnot. Beautiful. But yeah, thank you guys for joining the knowledge drop tonight. If you haven't been to one of these in a while, or this is your first one, just to kind of cover the house rules really quick.
Nice.
Basically, I'm just hosting, but we got Shane here as the main man of the hour, or the half an hour, as it were. And as Shane's going through his slide deck, feel free to continue to use the chat box, which you guys are using now. And also, obviously, if you want to ask any questions at the end, hold on to those. And if you don't want to forget them, there's a question and answer box in the webinar feature of Zoom too. So you can feel free to pop into the question and answer box, write any questions in there, and we'll get to them hopefully in the last 10 minutes or so. Also, as I mentioned, this is getting recorded, so you guys can find this video later in our knowledge drop blog archive. You can share it with anybody you want to share it with. And yeah, rewatch it over and over again for all of eternity, because it's going to be so mind-blowingly educational. And with all that out of the way, thanks again for being here, guys. And let me pass it over to my man Shane over in his hotel room in China. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I know you're the busiest dude in the fashion biz, but you're also a really generous guy. So willing to give half an hour of your time to myself and to the nation to share your story with everybody. So thanks a lot, man.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. So what do? I hit share screen here and get going?
Exactly. Let's jump into it. Yeah, share screen, present mode. Bada bing, bada boom.
All right. How's that look? You can see it?
It's beautiful there. Now you have it on.
All right. Sweet. Okay, cool. So I'm going to jump in here then. First off, full disclaimer, I'm extremely tired. I'm jet lagged and it's midnight here. So apologies if I start to slip a little bit or if I get a little bit foggy. On top of that, I haven't done a presentation for about 12 years at least, not since university. And I don't know if I've ever used PowerPoint. So anyway, now that the disclaimers are out, here's my presentation. So I'm doing my presentation on knowing why. Beating the entrepreneur's curse. So what's about to drop? So I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about how I started my business. Then I'm going to tell you about why I went traveling for a year, remote year, instead of obsessively trying to take my 8-figure business to 9, like I think most entrepreneurs would probably be doing. I'm going to talk about controlling your business demon and why you need to start asking why. So why I'm dropping this, there's a lot of things I could have talked about, and I actually spoke to Atlas about different things they wanted to learn about when it came to entrepreneurship, but I wanted to talk about this because it's something that hits home for me right now. So why I'm dropping it, I'm the founder of 2 multinational fashion brands with 8 figures in annual revenue, 70 employees. I have 7 retail stores. I've been doing this for over 8 years as CEO, designer, and entrepreneur. I was also named Canada's 2017 Entrepreneur of the Year. And on top of all of that, I've spent the last year learning techniques to conquer the demon that no one in business really wants to talk about. And I call it the business demon. So I'm going to just quickly tell you a little bit about my story. So when I was finishing up university, I'd been juggling 3 jobs and a full-time course load, and I was pretty much fully burnt out. I kept having this weird dream about a Buddha under a Bodhi tree. It was kind of like sketched on a wall. It was really weird. And my mom ended up asking me what I wanted for my graduation gift. And I just said a flight to Southeast Asia. I've never really considered myself a spiritual person or anything, but there was something about that dream that I just kept having. It just led me to taking the trip. So I went there for about 2.5 months, and I was truly on a shoestring. Like I can't even describe to you, maybe $5 a day often. But it was fun. It was fine. And somehow we managed to find enough money in that to drink. So we spent the first couple months really just drinking. But towards the end, I went to Bali, and my original plan was to learn to surf but I felt like I should take in some of the culture. So I went inland. I went to a small little village called Ubud. And when I was there, I saw a lot of master carvers and silversmiths, and they're doing really cool stuff, but nothing that I would actually wear. So I ended up asking one of the guys in one of the shops if he would ever make something custom. And he said, sure, why not? So I came back later that day with a little sketch on a piece of paper. It was awful. My sketches are still awful. I'm a terrible but he said, okay, no problem. Come back in a few days. So I did. I waited a few days, went back, a sample for me. I was pretty much immediately addicted. It was just such a crazy, surreal thing for me to see something that I thought of become something tangible. And I just immediately had to keep doing it. I immediately knew, that I had to keep doing it. So I ended up staying there for 3.5 weeks, continuing to revise the design, just basically doing a new version every 3 days. And finally, towards the end, I had something that I liked enough, kind of similar to this top ring on the bell here. It's that Blackwood one with the silver logo on it, the hourglass. And I ended up having home and just give them away as gifts because they're affordable. I could do them as gifts. So I brought them home and I did exactly that. I started giving them away. I probably gave away, 5 to 7 of them to friends. And, at first people were like, what the hell is this, a 2-finger ring? They weren't exactly in style because this was, almost 9 years ago. But people wore them to the bar and got a really, really good response. So they're like, all right, cool. I'm just going to keep wearing this. And then people started wearing them and other people started asking about them. And then I started getting, like, literally as if I was like selling weed or something. I started getting random calls from people, asking if they could buy a ring. And then I was walking down a street, and this is where we got to the haha, we're in business part. I was walking down a street in Toronto called Queen Street, which is kind of like Toronto's hippest, kind of best shopping street. And I was in a store, and the owner was in there. It was clearly the owner. She was kind of looking around, and I asked her if she would ever if she would ever carry those rings. And she ended up saying, go buy a receipt book. I'll buy all of them off you right now. So I literally sold her every last piece I had. And that's how the business started. Right after that, I went home. I was living with a buddy, and I took the last $3,000 I had on my student credit line and I sent it to the carver that made those first rings. I was very unemployed. I'd just gotten back from my trip, but I knew my mom had a spare room, and I guess the rest is history. I moved in with her and kind of started to figure things out. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of how everything started. That was 8 years ago. So I'm going to try and go through the next 8 years at rapid speed for the sake of time here. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to explain it based on goals. So every entrepreneur sets goals. It's kind of an obsessive thing, and you're going to continue to do it over and over and over again. The problem is how we set these goals, because I think it's really easy to lose track of what originally inspired you, and that's what I really want to talk about here. So goal number 1, sell enough rings to pay for another backpacking trip. That's what I started with. Simple as that. Really, really honest. Just like, I want to keep doing this thing that I'm passionate about. I want to keep traveling. From there, though, and it didn't take very long to get to this goal number 2, I decided maybe I could actually make a living creating these unique products because people are responding to them pretty well. By about 3 years in, I had a business partner, and we had an online store. We were selling to a lot of other stores, and the goal became build a business that might be worth $5 million someday. Goal number 4, business at this point. And then goal number 5, build a business worth $25 million. No, wait, why not $100 million? Yeah, let's do that. And that was kind of the period from, say, year 5 to year 7. So now we get to goal number 6. Goal number 6 is the most important one, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So goal number 6 is remembering why. So here's just a kind of quick rundown. Here's a screen grab of what my website looks like today for Vitaly. Here's a picture from one of our catalogs. Here's a screen grab from another brand. We started this brand 4 years ago, the brand. It just didn't really fit with Vitaly, but it was something I really wanted to do, so we just started another brand. So anyway, getting back to that last goal, this was my wake-up call. This is my friend Quilly. Just over a year ago, Quilly passed away abruptly. He was on vacation in Costa Rica. He was just having a good time. He slipped, he hit his head, and shortly after that, he passed away. So I'd only been friends with Quilly for about 2 years, but he had a pretty massive impact on me. And after he passed, I found myself thinking about the way that he lived his life. And in some weird, maybe semi-morbid way, I found myself kind of envious of him. I thought to myself, you know, this guy was 32 years old, but the way that he balanced his work life and his day-to-day life was so incredible. This guy was so funny, so fun. He was just the kind of person that everyone wanted to be around. And I just really felt like he actually lived. And I kept thinking to myself, like, 32 years living like that has to be better than 32 years living how I'm living right now, because I was just a full-fledged workaholic. So the day after his funeral, I obviously didn't really want to do very much. And I was kind of just wandering about my house, and I found the journal that I was actually writing in when I went on my first backpacking trip. And I guess I'd used it for other things over time as well. But it was pretty crazy. There was a lot of kind of profound notes to self that I wrote for myself 8 or 9 years ago that were significantly more wise than the person that I had become. And, you know, I think a lot of us think as we get older, we get smarter or wiser, but I knew what I wanted in life when I was 23 or 22, a lot more than I did when I was 30. And I think it's because as I started to experience success with my business, the business demon really started to take over. So going through that journal, I started to look at, you know, all these like to-do lists that I had. I started to look at my bucket list that was written out on there, all these reminders to self. And it inspired me to go and start writing some lists. So I literally just sat down that day and I just started writing. I pretty much started writing anything I could think of. But the most profound thing that I did for me at that time was I wrote a list of whys, just questions to myself. And so here's some examples of what I said. Why was I waking up in the morning? Why was I working myself to the point of exhaustion? Why was I ignoring my bucket list? Why were my relationships suffering? Like, if I'm successful, why do I not have time for my friends and family? Why did I sacrifice so much? Why didn't I feel like a success story? And why did I choose to be an entrepreneur? As you can probably imagine, when you start asking yourself a lot of these hard questions, it drums up a lot of emotions and a lot of thoughts. And it was really, really, really important for me. It was massively, massively impactful. So before I kind of go into what happened, I'm just going to play this. I hope it works for you guys. It's just a quick 2-minute video, but I think that it's maybe one of the more inspiring videos I've ever seen. Maybe some of you have already seen it, but I'm just going to run it.
You can write everything down if you want to. Be brave enough to write every one of your goals down. But I'm going to tell you something. Life's going to hit you in your mouth, and you got to do me a huge favor. Your why has to be greater than that knockdown. And I love it. Buster Douglas got knocked out. Nobody ever got knocked out by Mike Tyson and ever got back up. It was almost a 10 count. He was stumbling. They were 4, 3, 2, 1. Ding, ding. Saved by Bell. He goes to his corner. The whole world is like, that's it. Once he comes back out, that's it. Mike's going to just hammer him. And exactly that. Mike Tyson came out like, I got him. I got this kid up against the rope. Listen to me. Many of you right now, life's got you up against the rope. You can't give up. You can't give in. Listen to me. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And if life's got you backed up, I need you to do what Buster Douglas did. Buster Douglas started fighting back. The world was shocked. Goliath has been knocked down. What happened? And they went to Buster Douglas and they asked Buster Douglas simply like, what happened? And Buster Douglas said, listen to me. It's real simple. Before my mother died, she told the whole world that I was going to beat Mike Tyson. And 2 days before the fight, my mother died. Buster Douglas had a decision to make. When his mother died, he could die with his mother, or he made a decision, I can wake up and I can live for mom. And he knocked Mike Tyson out simply because his why was greater than that punch. His why was greater than defeat. His why was greater than his trial and his tribulation. And I'm telling you, if you don't know what your why is and your why isn't strong, you're going to get knocked out every single
So I don't know how you guys feel after that, but the first time I saw that, I definitely got chills. So I started asking myself why. And what I ended up realizing was that my why was always freedom, which often is kind of experienced for me through travel, and through working for myself and making my own decisions, and also creativity. So what did I do? I started looking at what I was actually doing, and then what my why is, and what would make me happy, and what would actually motivate me to do more in my business, but also in my life. And that resulted in me starting to pursue more creative projects. I actually packed up my life and set up for a year of solo travel, but I actually did that before even learning about remote year. So right near the start of my trip, I was in Nicaragua, and funny enough, I met Travis King, and that's how I learned about remote year. Yeah, there you go. About 6 weeks later, I was in South Africa, and I met my new travel family, Atlas. And you know what? The world didn't end. My business has actually grown stronger than ever this year. And when I go and I sit down at my computer to work, I go and I sit down at it knowing what my why is, and I sit down at it focused. And I actually am loving what I'm doing these days, and I'm designing more than ever. I've just spent the last 3 days here in China. I came up with over 50 designs, and I loved every second of it. Like, they were the longest days, and it felt good. It felt amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that I could have started giving away to employees, because, you know, I'm supposed to be the CEO now, but I realized that that was what made me happy. And if I gave those things away, then what was the point anymore? And, you know, when I started asking why, I also learned that sometimes you need to make pit stops to fully enjoy the journey. And really, I just began controlling my demon by being honest with myself. So I'm going to get back to the demon thing in a second. Really quick, though, I want to talk about what the experts are saying as well, because, you know, you can take it from me, but here's a ton of things that I just pulled from all kinds of other, you know, research papers, etc., from people who really studied the impact of asking why. And it can result in everything from happiness and growth to improved mental health, of course, to new perspectives. You know, it can help channel the inner you. But really, for me, the most important thing when it comes down to it is it helps control your demon. And what I mean by demon really is just your ego. So just a really quick thing here. I've seen all kinds of different stats. I don't know which one's accurate, but you know, one I found is as many as 1 in 3 entrepreneurs are depressed. I actually really believe that it's more than that, but I think that entrepreneurs should be the people who are the happiest. I just think that they often forget why they're doing what they're doing. So, you know, my guess would be that 50% aren't happy. And what's worse is most of them wouldn't even know what would make them happy, because they're not asking. They're not talking to themselves anymore about what really matters. So the keys to success, and when I say this, I mean, I don't just mean the keys to kind of beating your business demon. I mean the keys to being successful as a whole. Because I think if you're hoping to define your success just by how much money your business makes, I think, you know, there might be the person out there who that works for, but my guess is that's not going to fulfill you. So in case it's not deadly obvious, your business demon is your ego. And I think it needs to be kept in check for you to kind of stay honest and stay happy. So here's some quick things you can do. Be honest with yourself. And when I say that, I mean, go as deep as you can until you're sure that you know what's actually driving you. So don't stop at the first thing that comes to mind, because usually when you ask why, the first response is not actually the real thing. Like, you got to ask, well, why is that your response? And keep going as deep as you can. You should also spend time thinking about what inspires you and what originally inspired you. Try not, like, you know, I've heard people, you know, they'll put a car and say, like, you know, beside their desk, and they'll say, like, this is what inspires me. But what you'll find is if you're an entrepreneur, the second you get that car, you're already over it. And you need to find the things that actually have lasting impact, because it's got to be the journey. It can't just be the destination, or you're going to have a horrible, horrible experience. You really got to stop thinking about what others are doing. Entrepreneurs are always looking at the competition. It's okay to watch your competition, but don't be jealous of them, and don't obsess over it, because you need to really believe in yourself and what you're doing. And again, ask why often. So that's pretty much it. I think I've talked way more than I intended to. I apologize, but hopefully it was quick enough. I just wanted to leave you guys with a few resources that I thought were really, really interesting. A lot of you have probably seen this because it's one of TED Talk's most famous talks, but there's a talk by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. It's really, really, really powerful. And I think that it's an amazing thing, whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or somebody that's considering going into business. Masi, like if you're still watching, I would highly recommend this when you're starting to think about your business ideas. Learn how to use the 5 why system. This just kind of goes back to what I was saying. Don't answer something with the first why or the first answer that comes to mind. Learn about the 5 why system and keep going deeper if you can. And then this has been recommended before in a knowledge drop, but I would recommend reading Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I don't actually think you need to read the whole book. It gets a little bit redundant, but even if you read the first 3 or 4 chapters to just really kind of drive home how the ego can kind of dictate what you're doing, and you know, hopefully that will help you kind of see it from the outside in. And yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, that was awesome, man. And no, not too long at all. We still got at least 5 minutes left for questions. So why don't you jump out of screen share at the top there, then we'll just go back to our 2 faces and our matching outfits. It makes me feel really fashionable, actually, that I accidentally matched with my friend who's like a fashion guy, so I feel great. If you guys have questions, put them in the question and answer box. I'll start with one. No, I got one. So I think like I really love hearing back about your journey and how it all started. I remember hearing that when I first met you in Nicaragua, and it was a story that stuck with me. But I'm wondering too, like now that you're at where you're at and you're traveling and you have this sort of setup where you feel happy, you feel inspired, you're able to be on the road while still running your business. What does that look like for you long term? Like if you had to project 8 years out from now, where do you really see yourself? I know at some point too, you mentioned thinking about early on, like building a business and selling it. So it's like selling off what you started at some point, still maybe part of your plan. So yeah, where do you see yourself, I guess, down the road?
It's a good question. It's always really hard for me to think any further than a year from now. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are really, really in it will say the same thing. You know, you always hear people say, well, what's your 5-year plan when they're talking to somebody in business? But these days, businesses need to be way more agile. And like, just if I tried to plan 5 years in advance 5 years ago, I would be laughing at where we're at today because I would have never imagined it. So, you know, when it comes to where I see myself in 8 years, I definitely can't even think that far. I'm thinking about maybe the next year. And, you know, I'll be completely honest, I really was thinking about selling my business, but I think it was because I'd forgotten a lot of the things that really inspired me. And, you know, even these last 3 days, just designing like crazy and seeing the early samples coming out so quickly, I was like, I can't not be doing this. Like I have to be doing this. And when I think about selling the business, that's just money. That's just going to be a money thing. So if I do start thinking that way again, it's got to come back to why am I doing it? And I would say that would have to mean more creative projects, because if it was just to buy a house or a car, I would for sure end up depressed after that. And I wouldn't even have a creative outlet anymore. So yeah, I mean, 8 years from now, all I know is I'm going to be continuing to create things and probably going to be continuing to travel.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think, you know, you got to keep pushing. And I love that you mentioned like how you still want to do the design piece of the work, because obviously you could have just hired a bunch of designers and stopped designing altogether and just run the business side of things. But I think sticking with like what made you happy in the first place is beautiful. We did have a bunch of questions come in. Themi's asking, she said, sorry I missed the beginning, but do you actually have a brick and mortar store or do you sell exclusively online?
Yeah, so we have 7 brick and mortar stores right now. 3 are permanent, so 2 in Toronto and 1 in Montreal. And then we've got 4 that are kind of like long-term pop-ups. So we're like a year-long lease, and we just kind of keep re-signing that. So they're not like officially stores, but they look like they are.
Awesome. And then Fernanda, one of your fellow Atlas homies, she's asking, if somebody doesn't have the money to invest up front, like, do you have any advice for people that might want to start something but don't really have their own sort of like, you know, pot to pull out of in order to start with the initial investment?
Yeah, that's a really, really tricky one. And it's one I hear a lot. I think a lot of times people start looking at a business and they think, well, I need to make this much money so I can live off of it. You know, in some cases you do need a lot to start the idea. Of course, there's no doubt. But in other cases, maybe it just needs to be your side hustle and you can do it in the evenings and on the weekends like I did when I started, until you can kind of build it up to a point. Like I started with a few $1,000s. Some people might not even have that, so that's totally fair. But I didn't even need to start with that in theory. I needed to start with 5 rings, which, you know, I could have bought at the time for maybe $50 or something. So I think really I would kind of really dig in and ask yourself, do I actually need this much money? And, you know, if it comes down to it and you really do need that much money, the obvious is kind of the best place to start is ask friends and family. That's a really, really tough thing to do. You know, there are entrepreneurs that will tell you don't do that. But I will say that when you take money from friends and family, there's no better motivation to make sure you do a good job. So, you know, I think, yeah, it's probably the best I can say.
It's very true, very true. And Laura Gallagher is in here. She's asking, what's your best strategy, or do you have any strategy to focus on the journey instead of the mythical destination out in front of you? Like, how do you stay focused on the day-to-day?
Honestly, journaling is a huge thing. I only started journaling pretty much right when I started this trip again. I started journaling. I remember actually I was writing in my journal when we first met. And that was just kind of early days, started doing it again. That's huge. Just taking that few minutes every day just to reflect on what you're doing. I would say that that's the best thing I can do for sure. Because the thing with entrepreneurs is we often are just people who are like, go, 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 like straight go, like, you know, like always looking to the next step. And taking a second to look at what you have accomplished or what you did the day before even is pretty impactful.
It's awesome. That reminds me of all those studies that came out of Harvard, how like when kids get into Harvard, it's obviously this massive accomplishment. But once you get there, like the goalposts change again, and then you're comparing yourself to all the other kids at Harvard. So it's easy to get depressed again because you've totally forgotten what you just accomplished, and now you're like worried that you're, you know, not the top of your class anymore. But yeah, it's that same sort of entrepreneur's dilemma.
That's the thing, like, exactly. Like I'm saying this all from the perspective of entrepreneurs, but that applies to everyone. This whole conversation applies to everyone, you know, whether you're an executive stream or really any number of other career paths, or, you know, this could apply to so many things. It's really just, you know, it's a conversation about being honest with yourself and really thinking about like why you're doing things. And yeah, comparing yourself to other people is horrible. Like it's just a really bad way to go about things.
We have one other last question here that I think is just a great one to shut it down. Trish is asking, well, first she says, amazing journey and story. Thanks for sharing. What accomplishments are you most proud of? And also lastly, what are your best fashion pieces of advice for Travis?
What am I most proud of? I'm probably most proud of not quitting. There was just so many points where we thought for sure we were bankrupt. We were just like, we can't do this anymore. And, you know, a really, really big thing, a lot of entrepreneurs will deal with this, especially in the early days. I got pulled over by friends so many times and they said, why are you doing this? Like, you need to stop. Like, you've been doing this for 3 years. You're not making any money. You could have a good job. And I said, no, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel here. I know this is going to work. And I powered through. And, you know, fortunately, I had my business partner there who was always there beside me and who really believed in what we were doing. And that helped a lot too. But yeah, I would say most proud of just not quitting. And then for Travis, for fashion advice, shit. yeah, model it for us.
Actually, if I'm being honest, I was wearing my house dress like 10 minutes ago, and then I remembered that I'm supposed to put on my like normal nice shirt for when I do the knowledge drop. So this is a nice outfit.
I say you should just do you. You should have worn the house dress. I think we all would have wanted to see it, you know?
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Good man, good friend. I really do appreciate you doing the knowledge drop. I know you, like you've been saying, have been working 14-hour days over in China and going crazy with keeping it going, man. And super, super happy for you, man, that you've had all the success. And thanks to all you guys that joined out there. Any last words you want to say before we shut it down? Thanks.
No, actually, I think thanks everyone for taking the time to watch it. I appreciate it. I didn't really know if people would tune in, and I appreciate the questions.
Awesome. Sweet. Cheers, guys. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another knowledge drop. Yeah, thanks again. Ciao.